Let's get into our bust picks from before the season. Some of the names we got right, some of the names we got wrong, kind of like we did last episode. Just kind of talk through some of our thought processes and kind of what we learned from some of those picks. So, Scott, one of the, or maybe the bust pick you got most right, or one of them, was Mark Vientos. And I mentioned this last episode. Junior Caminero versus Mark Vientos was a huge talking point and discussion. It was, that was a pick that many people had to make, deciding between those two. And your season would have gone very differently depending on who you took between Junior Caminero and Mark Vientos.
Yes. And if you had read any of my content in the preseason, you would have known to take Caminero instead of Vientos. Vientos, of course, they did have as a bust. And I think it played out very much like I thought it would. So the problem with Mark Vientos, of course, he had a great season for the Yankees, or for the Mets, in 2024, hitting 27 home runs. And that was only in 111 games. So it took him a while to get the third base job, but he did go on to hit 27 home runs at an 837 OPS. A lot of people thought he could build on that with an even better season. But he was still a player with pretty bad plate discipline, a very low walk rate that kept his on-base percentage down, some strikeout issues that actually part of the reason Vientos entered the lineup as an everyday player for the Mets is because he seemed to be improving in terms of strikeouts, but then he kind of lost all of it again in the second half, managed to perform well in spite of it, but that obviously created a concern there for him. And then he's a right-handed hitter who doesn't get on base at a particularly high rate, whose defense is suspect. Now, once they brought back Pete Alonso, it was pretty clear Vientos was going to have to be good enough offensively for the Mets to justify playing him at third base consistently. And when you don't have the platoon advantage as a right-handed hitter, you're struggling to get on base. It just seemed like there was a narrow margin for error there. Taking all those factors into account, the poor on base skills, the vulnerability to strikeouts, the suspect defense, the right-handedness, and by the way, Brett Beatty still in the organization. Obviously, Vientos outperformed him considerably in 2024. That's how he got the job. But it wasn't an open and shut case. If Vientos gave any of that back, and he did, he gave a lot of it back. And meanwhile, Beatty took this step forward to the point that by the end of the season, it was Beatty playing even more consistently than Vientos was. So it was just a situation where you had a player seemingly coming off a breakout season, but people were ignoring some of the risk factors there and taking it all at face value, even in some cases presuming continued improvement for Vientos. And if the cost was different, if everybody was skeptical of this breakthrough for Vientos, I might have taken a different stance and been like, okay, let's see the glass half full with this guy. But when the cost was what it was for Vientos, as you said, going in some drafts even higher than Junior Caminero, it's like, I could see ways for this to go wrong. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, the weirdest part for Vientos this past season was that his strikeout rate actually improved, but I think it came at the cost of him hitting for the same power that he did the year prior. Now, he did pick things up in the second half a little bit. He had some moments, but overall, 233 batting average, 17 home runs. Not a great season there from Mark Vientos. So good call from you on that one. Wanted to mention two names here that I was pretty pleased with as bust calls before the season. Ronald Acuna. Now, this one is interesting. He had a preseason ADP of 37.6. He finished 148th overall. He was still really good when he played this season, but part of the reason why I was fading him was I always thought that he would debut a little bit later than they were kind of leading on. I think the people who drafted him in the third or fourth round might have thought, okay, he'll be back May 1st, and he'll just kind of be Ronald Acuna. And so he didn't debut until May 23rd, so later than I think most people thought. He missed time later in the season as well with some left Achilles tendonitis and missed a month with that as well. So only wound up playing 95 games, and he just didn't run. And that was part of the issue too. I just didn't know which version of Ronald Acuna we were going to get. And that question is still out heading into next season too. We don't really know how much he's going to run. He's still an extremely talented player. He's in the prime of his career. He hit for great power. He scored a bunch of runs. The batting average was good, but he's had so many lower leg injuries and has missed a lot of time so far in his career that I was worried about that. So I think that one actually kind of worked out well, fading Ronald Acuna in that spot. And then the other one was O'Neal Cruz, who it looked bad early on in the season, right? Because he got off to that great start, but the batting and the batting average and strikeouts just tanked his season. It was a preseason ADP of 37.4. So, a 3-4 turn pick there in a 12-team league. He finished 171st overall. That was despite 20 homers and 38 steals. The problem is he hit just 200 over a big amount of plate appearances, a 32% strikeout rate, a sub 700 OPS. So while the power was okay, obviously you wanted more. The speed was very good. Everything else was pretty bad. And obviously the batting average was abysmal there. And I think we're left with even more questions on O'Neal Cruz than we are Ronald Acuna heading into next year. It's, can he hit lefties? He's been awful against them in his career. And now the strikeouts have continued to pile up as well. So lots of questions on both of these guys, but I think based on where they were drafted, neither of them lived up to it. Ronald Acuna as like a 3rd round pick, and O'Neal Cruz actually right around that range as well.
Yeah, O'Neal Cruz definitely created some major concerns moving forward because we haven't seen much improvement from him other than just improving the steal total, as you mentioned. But as a hitter, there hasn't been the growth we wanted to see. And he was an active detriment to your fantasy team from about May 1st on.
Yeah.
Like so much of his production came in April. May 1st on, he hit 185 with a 614 OPS. And so he's not going to have shortstop eligibility next year. It's just going to be outfield. And I don't think there is going to be a lot of enthusiasm for drafting O'Neal Cruz for really the first time in his major league career. He's not going to be that trendy, buzzworthy player in the early rounds who's like, okay, if he just does this, this, and this right, he's a 1st-round caliber player, which might present a buying opportunity because the upside hasn't changed. I think it's just our confidence in O'Neal Cruz ever reaching it, given the lack of progress so far, given that he's now 27 years old. I think it's fair to be skeptical. I've actually spent the past couple days working on outfield rankings, very deep position, obviously. Right now, I have O'Neal Cruz 24th for roto leagues and 27th for points leagues.
All right.
I don't know if that sounds surprising to you, high or low, or
my first thought is high for O'Neal Cruz. Yeah.
So let's see. He is ahead of Kyle Stowers and Tyler Soderstrom and Brandon Nimmo and Andy Pajes. Those are the next 4.
Yeah, all those players seem fine, but yeah, I was about to say if O'Neal Cruz hits his upside, obviously it's higher than those guys, but I don't know. The sample size is growing with O'Neal Cruz. I don't know if we can keep going back to that same, if he hits his upside, because he's been given a fair shake at this point and questions still remain. So I don't know. Like I still think there's variance in his game. I still think there's a level we haven't seen yet, but we've just seen so much downside from O'Neal Cruz. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe he should be ranked ahead of those names because I'm not sure that they're like true difference makers. Maybe the way that O'Neal Cruz could be, but I don't know. I'm kind of talking myself into a pretzel here. I've got to do some outfield rankings myself and see where I come out on that. What about the bust picks that we got most wrong? Last week we started off the podcast talking about Pete Crow Armstrong, which is just kind of the headliner here on this podcast. The other one was Jacob deGrom, who we were all kind of fading. And Scott, I think as we got closer to the season, you were more open to the idea of taking deGrom with some of the reports and velocity being down on purpose. But this one was pretty straightforward. We all knew it came down to health with Jacob deGrom, and he stayed healthy. He threw 172 2/3 innings, the first time he's even hit 100 innings since 2019, and he was very good. It was a 2.97 ERA, a 0.92 WHIP, over a strikeout per inning. He wasn't the dominant force that he once was. But I think that kind of comes with the territory, him taking a little velocity off, not being the true ace, top of the league type pitcher, Jacob deGrom, but still being an SP1 type with this slightly diminished velocity.
Yeah. So my case for deGrom being a bust, and I said multiple times leading up to the season, it was the bust pick I was most confident in. And that's because he upped his velocity beginning in 2020 after already winning 2 Cy Young awards. He was back-to-back Cy Young winner. And then he added a couple more miles per hour velocity. Okay, that's going to make him more dominant. And it did on a per inning basis. But I think the fact that he went 4 years throwing at that velocity, falling short of 100 innings each time, showed that his body just could not hold up. Like it would break. It would break when he got that kind of force on it. And so I just thought, okay, this is going to happen again. He's shown that he cannot hold up to this velocity. Something's going to happen again. But then he came out and he was throwing his fastball a couple miles per hour slower, took a little velocity off. And that is about the velocity Jacob deGrom sat at in those 2 Cy Young seasons. The last time we saw him throw not just 100 innings, but 200 plus. And, by that point, the drafting was done. Because I think this didn't come out until the season already started, right? Or was it at the very end of spring training? I think the season had already started. It's like, what's wrong with deGrom's velocity? And it's like, well, he's doing this intentionally. He said it himself.
I think it was in spring training. I think before the season.
Okay. And I did end up with one share of him in the podcast listeners league, because I at least became open to the possibility. Well, if my argument for why deGrom can't hold up is it's always been the case since he started throwing harder, maybe not throwing as hard will allow him to hold up. And that ended up being what happened. So good on him for figuring that out, because it's rare that you see a pitcher give up velocity voluntarily these days. But he obviously, his 2 Cy Young seasons showed he would. That's all the velocity he needed. No, on a per inning basis, he wasn't as dominant as from 2020 through 2024. But I think we would all agree that the overall outcome in fantasy was better this way. deGrom going 172 2/3 innings.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if we can get, he's up there in age. I think he's 36 or 37 years old, or turning 37 this offseason. But if we can get, 1 or 2 more years of numbers kind of close to this over, 150 to 170 innings, that would be a nice way for Jacob deGrom to kind of round out his career. So a very nice bounce back for him. Other bust picks that we got most wrong, Scott, Bryce Terang. I mean, this one is just, I think we were all kind of skeptical of the hitter, Bryce Terang, and he came out, up the average exit velocity like crazy, and just completely kind of changed his fantasy output this past season. So a quick thought on Bryce Terang.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of bust pick I can't exactly regret, because he just changed who he was. He started hitting the ball 3 to 4 miles per hour harder, both on average. And then you look at the max velocity, the increase was that much, was similar there for Bryce Terang. So, you can only go by the data that's available to you. And Bryce Terang just got better. And we saw that power manifest, especially in August when he started hitting the ball at the proper angles for home runs. So that's kind of the next step for him, I think, to sustain that, because he kind of went back to not pulling it in the air so much in September. But clearly, Terang hits the ball hard enough now that he can be a power hitter. And with the stolen base ability we know he has, that could make for a very high-end outcome.
Couple preseason bust picks here that I got pretty wrong. Jazz Chisholm, I was just worried about the injuries and the fact that you had to use a second or third round price tag on him. The final ADP wound up being 21.8. So yeah, pretty much a second round pick in most leagues. He went 30-30 despite missing a month out of the season. And he's just been a much more impactful fantasy player since joining the Yankees about mid-season in 2024. So I don't really doubt the player. I still have some questions about the injuries and things, but for next season, he's entering a contract year. Players find a way to stay on the field and do amazing things in contract years. So I'm more open to the idea of using a second round pick on Jazz Chisholm in 2026. And with Robert Suarez of the Padres, I was completely out on this. He had a lack of strikeouts. He just relied heavily on the fastball. He took a step back in the second half of the year before in 2024. And there were really good relievers around him. Actually, this was a bust case that I was pretty confident in. I did not think it was going to work out for Robert Suarez. I think on the Beat FBT team that we all did together, we wound up taking him just because I think everyone felt the same way, and he just lasted really long, and he felt like the last kind of closer that had a job in that draft. And so we took him and reaped the rewards there. But I felt like the bust case for him was actually pretty solid. But to his credit, I think he mixed up his pitch mix a little bit more, and he was one of, if not the most reliable closer in fantasy this past season. So shout out to Robert Suarez. And he has an opt-out. I'm pretty sure he'll do that and get paid by some other team. And Mason Miller will either wind up being the closer or maybe a starter with someone else filling in as the closer for the Padres.
This is like my biggest draft regret this year. Yeah. And there was one league late in draft season. I was kind of the defender for Robert Suarez, but it felt like it was us against the world, Suarez and I against the world, in terms of still believing he could hold on to the closer role. And so one of my last drafts, I succumbed to the masses, and I went against my own rankings, took Jordan Romano ahead of Robert Suarez. And like, I hate,
sorry, I influenced you, Scott.
I mean, it wasn't just you. Like, this was it's the way everybody was talking about Robert Suarez. I just, I'm
pretty sure he looked bad in spring training too. Like, it was just compounding everything. Yeah.
No, he was. But yeah, it was making too much of too little, was basically my argument at the time.
Yeah.
But everybody's got to be, the smart guy who sees the unexpected thing happening. And it got to a point where there was such consensus over this. Oh, Robert Suarez is going to collapse, that even though I was like, yeah, but there's a good chance he doesn't. I ended up, that's like, this is something I need to, because I talked about this with Pete Crow Armstrong a couple weeks ago too. Like, I need to get better at tuning out the voices, Yeah.
And it's tough, man. It's loud in spring training. It is loud.
I used to not follow any other fantasy baseball people on Twitter. I used to just follow baseball writers, to get it was basically a news feed for me, right? That's what I had set up. But then I started following other fantasy baseball people, and it's too much. I hear too much of what other people are thinking. It clouds my own judgment, and maybe I need to start unfollowing people. I don't know. They probably won't appreciate that much, but it's too much. I can't handle it.